Hi, welcome to Chard Review. After losing his entire family in a T-Rex attack, a small dinosaur must face the dangers of the Cretaceous and fight for his life so that he can become an adult and go after revenge. Today we will review the story of the 2012 movie Speckles the Tarbosaurus. 80 million years ago, on a beautiful full moon night, a baby Tarbosaurus hatches from its egg and is named Speckles because of the spots on its face. Raised by his mother, the little dinosaur lives with Quix, his older brother who is now over 10 years old, and the twins, his two middle sisters with 5 mouths to feed. Mama Tarbosaurus decides to take the family hunting, but since Speckles is still very young, she leaves him watching as they prepare to ambush a group of Parasaurolophus. With everyone in position, Quix dashes forward towards the herd of herbivores, managing to separate 3 of them and lead them towards the twins who remain hidden in the bushes, waiting to approach. As soon as the prey gets close enough, the sisters come out from behind the bushes and join with Quix to lead them towards the matriarch, who bites the neck of one of the parasaur and instantly eliminates it. After the hunt, the Tarbosaurus family gathers and begins feeding, unaware that from a hilltop a large one-eyed Tyrannosaurus is watching them from afar. Although he is tempted to attack and conquer the territory, the T-Rex sees that they are outnumbered and decides just to treat, waiting for another opportunity to strike. After the meal, Mammy Tarbosaurus and her oldest son lie down while Speckles tries to play with the twins, but seeing that they don't want to let their youngest join in, Quix decides to join the siblings and take them for a walk in the forest. While exploring the place, Speckles encounters a repentant mammoth that starts to run away, luring the little predator to its nest. Upon seeing the family of prehistoric badgers, the little Tarbosaurus takes pity and gives up, eliminating the mammals, allowing them to return to the nest. As soon as he is alone, Speckles hears a strange sound among the trees and begins to follow it, ending up right where a Therizinosaurus is eating gravel to aid digestion. Even though it is herbivorous, this large-clawed dinosaur is extremely territorial, and because of this it prepares to attack Speckles as soon as it notices his presence. Just as he is about to strike the blow, however, Quix emerges from the bushes and headbutts the creature, sending it flying far away. As soon as the Therizinosaurus gets up, the twins also appear and the 4 begin to flee while being chased by the prehistoric Wolverine from the hilltop. One-eyed Tyrannosaurus awakens to the desperate cries of little Speckles, but before he decides to get involved in the chase, he sees a Pinnacleosaurus rubbing himself against a rock to clean his skin. Despite being very slow, dinosaurs of this species have a kind of hammer on the end of their tails, capable of knocking out anyone who tries to attack them. Hungry, One-Eye decides he can't waste the opportunity and begins to push a rock in the Pinnacleosaurus's direction, crushing its tail and leaving it completely defenseless with the prey almost completely immobile. The T-Rex goes to it and ends the hunt with a bite to the neck, putting the dinosaur out of its misery and finally satisfying its hunger. While he eats, the Tarbosaurus family decides to go out hunting again, but with Speckles' help this time. After defining the strategy, the youngest joins his older brother and they start to spy on another herd of parasites. But instead of waiting for Quix's orders to attack the younger ones, little Speckles decides to advance alone towards the adults. Seeing the perfect opportunity to conquer the territory, One-Eye decides to descend into the valley and starts leading the herd towards the little Tarbosaurus, forcing Quix to slip into the middle of the crowd to avoid Speckles being crushed instead. Still, the herbivores keep running from the Tyrannosaurus and end up trapping the twins on the edge of a cliff, knocking them into the abyss without them having the slightest chance to survive. After losing 3 of her children at once, the Tarbosaurus mother begins to mourn until the Tyrannosaurus stops right in front of her and challenges her to a fight for the territory. Even in mourning, the female cannot back down and begins to confront One-Eye, who bites her neck and knocks her to the ground. Still, she manages to fight back and hits the bug T-Rex in the face with a kick, causing its jaw to bleed. After the female gets up, the Tyrannosaurus once again bites her neck and starts pushing her towards the cliff, knocking her into the abyss and finally taking over the territory 1 month after losing his entire family. In the T-Rex attack, Speckles lives in hiding in the middle of the forest and barely has anything to eat or drink because the velociraptors always walk in groups, devouring everything they find on the way completely. Hungry, the baby Tarbosaurus decides to follow some pterosaurs to the nest to try to steal the eggs. However, since the female is always protecting the home, he goes into stealth mode and sneaks around until he reaches the food. But just as Speckles finishes satisfying his hunger, an adult pterosaur catches him eating the eggs and starts attacking him, forcing the little predator to run through cracks in the rocks. Still, the creature continues after him until it manages to knock him off the rocks, causing him to fall into the middle of the ocean after returning to dry land. Speckles, close to the top of a rock, and decides to sleep. But while he is lying down, a group of velociraptors passed by, chasing a Hypsilophodon baby, and he decides to go after it, curious to know what will happen. Unaware that the baby Tarbosaurus is after them, the group of predators continue the chase until their prey ends up getting bogged down in the quicksand. Thirsting for blood, one of the velociraptors jumps on top of the Hypsilophodon and bites its neck, only to be sucked into the highly viscous mud. Seeing that there is nothing they can do, the rest of the group retreats while Speckles, such as those animals being swallowed, and wonders if there is some kind of monster in the mire. Hungry and tired, the baby Tarbosaurus decides to return to his old nest, where he begins to mourn the loss of his family. But while he is innocently playing with his old bone, the Tyrannosaurus appears and drops a prey among the rocks, taking advantage that the predator has gone to drink water in the stream. Speckles approaches the carcass and begins to devour it, eating meat for the first time in a long time. But One Eye returns and catches him stealing his food, starting the chase during the escape. Speckles stumbles into the middle of a cave and drops the piece of meat, almost getting eaten by the T-Rex when he comes back to retrieve his dinner. Still, the little Tarbosaurus manages to escape with the food and gets his first decent night's sleep in a long time. For years later, Speckles manages to survive and keeps growing, but since he is still too small to avenge his family, he lives in hiding, observing the routine of the other dinosaurs and watching from the sidelines the fight between two Torosaurus to see who will be the new alpha male from afar. One Eye also watches the dispute, in which the former leader loses his horns and ends up being exiled. With the animal totally defenseless, the T-Rex finally decides to act and begins to hunt the wounded Torosaurus, but during the chase he comes face to face with Therizinosaurus, who is willing to face anyone to defend his territory. Trapped, One Eye begins to retreat while the large herbivore advances towards him, and when he thinks there is nowhere else for the invader to escape, the animal decides to attack. However, the T-Rex manages to dodge at the last second, and the Therizinosaurus traps its claws on the trunk of a tree. With its target defenseless, One Eye approaches from the other side and snatches its neck, taking the life of its prey and beginning to devour it shortly thereafter. While the Tyrannosaurus is eating, a blue-eyed Tarbosaurus slowly approaches and tries to grab some food, but One Eye notices her presence and begins to chase her, giving Speckles the chance to grab a piece of meat and take it back to the cave. While he is making his meal, the other Tarbosaurus shows up and they begin to fight over the food. However, Speckles notices that she is full of wounds caused by One Eye and decides to share the meal. Starting a great partnership with the blue-eyed female 5 years later, Speckles and Blue Eyes are now about 10 years old and are now big and extremely fast, able to hunt and keep up quite easily. But despite this, they decide to move away from One Eye and live their lives as usual, forgetting the idea of revenge and thinking only of the future until one afternoon while they are hunting in the mud, the Tyrannosaurus rises from the ashes and starts advancing towards Blue Eyes, forcing the Tarbosaurus duo to unite against him. Still, Speckles knows he won't be able to defeat, and backs away for a moment, giving the gap for One Eye to advance towards the female and knock her to the ground. Seeing what he has done, the male is filled with courage and moves towards the T-Rex, biting the predator's thigh. With this they begin to face each other as Blue Eyes lifts, but Speckles knows they won't be enough and decides to lure the predator to the quicksand. One-Eye finds it strange and starts to back away, forcing the Tarbosaurus to provoke him and lure him further into the mud. In this way, he finally manages to get the T-Rex trapped and starts walking towards Blue. It's to celebrate their victory, but soon One-Eye manages to get out of the mud and starts angrily facing them unstoppable. The Tyrannosaurus makes the pair run for their lives, forcing them to move even further away from their old nest to stay away One-Eye. As they walk, Blue Eyes becomes exhausted and her legs start to fail, forcing Speckles to stop to try to encourage her. But while he is trying to encourage the female, a group of tortoise shells passed by and the pair decide to follow them, ending up at a large hot springs pond where the dinosaurs rest and heal their wounds. 10 years later, the Tarbosaurus couple are now adults and decide to take advantage of the mating season to build their new nest. But since they need food to survive, Speckles goes out hunting and even alone manages to bring down a powerful Torosaurus, knocking it out with a simple bite. Unbeknownst to him, One-Eye manages to find them and watches everything from afar. The cursed T-Rex decides to follow him to the nest site and throws a gigantic rock at the couple while they are feeding. Seeing the rock coming towards him, Speckles pushes Blue Eyes aside and ends up getting hit. Following all the way into the icy sea out of the water, the female Tarbosaurus faces One-Eye to protect her nest. But even as an adult, she is not strong enough and is easily defeated by the Tyrannosaurus. Determined to protect her home, Blue Eyes kicks the T-Rex in the face, just as Speckles' mother did, but it isn't long before she is defeated once again and left completely defenseless. At that moment, Speckles comes out of the water with blood in his eyes and ready to fight. To end this nightmare. Determined, the two males begin to stare and roar at each other for some time. Until One-Eye decides to start the attack and headbutts his enemy. At this point, Blue Eyes returns to the fight and gets a bite out of the T-Rex's tail, which manages to break free easily and once again throws it away, taking advantage of Speckles being distracted by the female. One-Eye moves towards him and bites him on the neck, starting to drag him towards the cliff just as he did his mother. But at the last second, the Tarbosaurus sees Blue Eyes on the ground and starts to remember everything the evil lizard has ever done, filling himself with rage and becoming even more motivated to finish off once and for all. With this, Speckles manages to get loose and begins to do better in the fight, biting the Tyrannosaur's neck and pushing him away with incredible force. In this way, the Tarbosaurus manages to win and the T-Rex has no choice but to retreat. Completely defeated but determined to come back and take revenge. After the victory, the Tarbor couple decided to return to the old nest where Speckles was born and expand the family there, laying eggs and keeping watch 24 hours a day until they hatch. When the time finally comes, only 2 of the eggs. Etch and the couple begins to receive them, but while they are distracted, one last baby chick full of face spots hatches out of the egg and Speckles decides to call it Junior. Speckles Jr. with 5 members in the family, they spend the next few days living peacefully, but the Cretaceous is already nearing its end and the entire planet begins to undergo changes, causing numerous volcanoes to erupt. In one of these explosions, the earth around the nest begins to shake and they decide to huddle together. But when boiling rocks begin to fall from the sky and day turns to night, the Tarbosaurus family has no choice but to abandon the nest and flee. In the middle of the forest, the dinosaurs start to get hit by the scorching rocks that set the trees on fire, charring everything they find along the way. Knowing he can't go through there, Speckles and his family decide to escape through the caves. However, the tremors cause the rocks to begin to give way, and one of them ends up crushing the eldest son, hitting the middle one lightly. She realizes that there is another rock falling and runs to prevent Junior from being crushed, pushing him away and getting hit instead. Still, she manages to get up and begins to flee together with her family. Even with great difficulty with the destruction of the forest, a huge number of dinosaurs have lost their home and they band together to find a new shelter. But since Blue Eyes is injured, the Tarbosaurus family cannot keep up and slowly falls behind, becoming the perfect target for the velociraptors that follow the herd. While the small predators try to hunt down the babies of the group, Blue Eyes begins to be exhausted by her wound and can no longer walk, tumbling in the middle of the trail and becoming stagnant on the ground. As soon as he realizes this, Speckles and his sons return and begin to encourage the female to get up. But while they are talking to her, another wounded dinosaur tumbles right behind them in. The velociraptors quickly cluster around the carcass, beginning to devour it, knowing that this is what will happen to Blue Eyes if she doesn't get up. Speckles begins to urge her to move, but all the moving causes the velociraptors to notice their presence and start running towards the family, ready to devour the female. Already knowing their intention, the Tarbosaurus moves forward, determined to crush the damn creatures, but they quickly notice the presence of the young and begin to corner family, with some advancing toward the young while the others stay to face the adult. Seeing the two velociraptors approaching, their young Speckles rushes in and crushes one of them while destroying the other with one bite. Still, the sneaky lizards do not give up and start jumping on the Tarbosaurus, forcing him into a deadly battle to save his wife and children. Even trapped, Speckles continues to fight and take the lives of anyone who dares to approach his family, but when Blue Eyes' life begins to fade, he decides to stop fighting and approaches them for one last goodbye after seeing his wife losing her life before his eyes. He decides to leave her body behind and begins to run with his young towards the rest of the herd, leaving the velociraptors to feed on Blue Eyes so that their offspring can survive. After 2 weeks wandering in the desert, the group of dinosaurs finally arrive in a habitable zone and decide to build their nests in this new place. But before they can even establish themselves, One Eye finds them and decides to take advantage that the group is in a narrow passage to complete his revenge against Speckles. As the Tarbosaurus family watches the sea, the T-Rex begins to chase the herd, driving hundreds of dinosaurs toward Speckles and his children. Remembering what happened to his sisters when he was little, the young dinosaur rushes forward into the crowd to save the babies, but ends up hitting a triceratops on the head and faints instantly after the other dinosaurs passed by. One Eye arrives at the small ones and hits the middle one with a headbutt, causing it to be smashed against the rocks. Seeing this, Speckles runs toward Junior and decides that he will give his life to protect that of his last son, becoming determined to make the Tyrannosaur pay for everything he has caused. As the battle begins, One Eye leaps toward the Tarbosaurus, who fights back and manages to bite his neck, knocking him to the ground quite easily. At a disadvantage, the Tyrannosaur decides to use a dirty strategy and starts trying to attack the little one, managing to land several blows on Speckles as he struggles to save Junior. Finally, One Eye takes advantage of the Tarbosaurus' distraction to strike the cub with his tail, knocking it into the sea to end Speckles' family once and for all, but this time the father is willing to fight back and also strikes a blow at the T-Rex, knocking it into the water. Worried, the Tarbosaurus begins to search for his youngster in the sea and realizes that Junior has managed to survive. But since One Eye is also in the ocean, he takes distance and jumps right on top of them while they were fighting. Speckles manages to scratch the T-Rex and make it bleed, which ends up attracting a pair of more than 50-foot-long Tylosaurus that are ready to devour everything in their path. While the sea monsters are not arriving, Speckles returns to the surface where he continues to bite One Eye back, but seeing his son struggling in the water, he decides to abandon the battle and starts swimming to save him. Taking advantage of the distraction, the T-Rex appears on the surface ready to attack the enemy from behind, but is caught by the Tylosaurus at the last second, being dragged to the bottom of the ocean where it is devoured alive. Finally at peace, Speckles begins to swim toward Junior, but is extremely tired and begins to lose consciousness. Fainted, the Tarbosaurus is about to drown when he hears the cub's cries and realizes that he cannot abandon him, gathering his last strength to reach the youngster and bring him to dry land again. Even though he is completely exhausted, Speckles manages to reach the beach and starts walking towards a new land for his son. A place with water, plenty of vegetation and safe for Junior to grow up happy and become a great Tarbosaurus just like him. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe for more movie reviews. See you next time.